quality assurance, because we are trying to make sure that we are making a record of the input here, so that people who weren't able to come and join us for the lovely Budapest sunshine and dinner can sit at home in misery and watch us having a good time. But it is important, and maybe next year we will be able to deliver an update using a webinar format, because we have built working relationships together. We can then draw on that in the future. So, quality assurance. I'm very interested in quality enhancement, which is making life better and better and new ideas, but quality assurance is incredibly important, because without it, your reputation can go downhill and people can stop believing that you are offering a good service. And so it's very important to make sure that the quality is assured, as well as building and enhancing. So that's what I just wanted to explain again to you about the quality assurance processes which we have brought in EULAR to make sure that across Europe everybody can have faith and trust that we know what we are doing, and that the certificate is a very serious and important thing to achieve. So first of all, I just wanted to ask people to wave. Wave at me if you've ever been an examiner in your other life outside EULAR. Who's been an examiner in, say, a medical school and other people? Okay, some people. Thank you. Hands up if you've ever contributed a single question to some kind of test or tested students on knowledge at any time. Yes, another sprinkling. And but I'd be very surprised if you've had a full and extensive training on exactly what you were supposed to be doing and how you were supposed to be doing that assessment. It was sort of assumed that you had magically become an educator as well as a rheumatologist and all-round good person. So what we are doing today, we will be revisiting some of the technical, factual things which will make you a very effective assessor, and you will be able to use that in your other roles, I'm sure. Now, I have been thinking about this for a long time, at least 20 years more, and there are still new things to think. One thing I realised today is that a lot of people are talking about evaluating students and assessing courses. That is the way America talks about this. In the UK, we assess students and evaluate courses. How annoying. It is just switched round. So whenever I talk about assessing students, I am A1, A2, I'm talking about them doing a test, doing an exam. And when I talk about evaluating a course, I mean standing back and looking at its quality and saying, well, which bits went really well and where can we improve? Okay, so that might be confusing to some of you if you've been familiar with using those terms the other way around. So I'll now just show you some brief slides. So I wanted to talk about where this fits in our educational priorities. And the number one fact about this is no student can avoid assessment. Okay, so they can avoid your teaching, they can read the textbook on their own, they can, be fantastic in clinic, but they cannot get the certificate without doing the assessment. And so if we do terrible assessment that's not valid, so it doesn't test the right things, and it's not reliable, people are wildly keen one day and think it's terrible the next, then we have not produced the high enough quality. And so it is an important thing to concentrate on, because everybody has to go through it. And so our themes today, as we mentioned, is about how to make sure we're not just doing excellent computerized testing, but that everything we teach is relevant to the clinical context. And at this level, that is very important, because it's much easier to test recall and to run every test like it's some sort of rote learning test. And that's all right at the beginning of medical school, but it is absolutely not all right at specialist postgraduate level. But guess what? It's really much more difficult to write good assessments and good material in the clinical context. And so that's why we're here today, to try and work out how to get better at it and to improve each other's attempts. So another priority is to make sure that we're not just changing to a new environment just to make your lives difficult. It gives us new opportunities. We can have multimedia things, we can record explanations, we can include more pictures. And so we're thinking of different ways to incorporate new media into the way we teach and assess. So my sort of aim is to make sure at the end of the day, all EULAR educational activity should be seen by all rheumatologists as relevant. Okay, so it's really valid to the practice of being a rheumatologist across Europe. And that's really quite a challenge, isn't it? It's got to be relevant for somebody in the south of Portugal and somebody in the north of Sweden. Okay, and there are different approaches in many of these countries. And when we look at, every year at the convenors meeting, we look and see the geographical origins of the people who are studying with us. We have lots of people from Russia, we have lots of people from India, we have people from South America. Suddenly there's some countries suddenly have a spike as everybody learns about an online course. So the challenge of that is to make sure that we are still including things which they find relevant and are valid for rheumatology across Europe and the world. So again, that's worth grappling with intellectually, I think. But it must be seen as reliable. Okay, so everybody every year who does the same qualification must be seen as being just as good as each other. And you don't want to feel that somebody who wasn't good enough and didn't do the work also got the certificate if you tried really hard. So, we need to, and all what that adds up to all together is this really complicated concept called being fair. Now, it's very complicated, but even a child of 6 knows when something is fair and when something is not fair. Okay. And it's very important to keep building this sense that what we are doing is fair and that we can all rely on EULAR to deliver this environment. And, I was going to, there's something else there. Yes, and what this adds up to is an important concept in education called face validity. And what it means is everybody believes that it was a fair process. And so you can quite easily accidentally lose face, like embarrassed, lose your credibility, and you lose your face validity. So it's important that things run smoothly and that exams don't have spelling mistakes in them or incorrect answers or numbers that don't add up, because all of those things look unfair, unreliable, and make it seem as if we cannot have faith in the process. And that's why we have to have lots and lots of steps and checks to make sure that we are not putting anything out there to students, particularly in assessment, that is not as good as it can be. Because if we spell something wrong, how do they know we haven't got the wrong answer? These things really knock confidence. And this is, of course, our aspiration for the School of Rheumatology. By 2023, EULAR will be the leading provider of education in rheumatic and musculoskeletal diseases, RMDs. So that's where we're all heading. So I want you to just have a slight break from listening to the front for a moment. And this is evaluation. So this is working out where you're already good and where your course may already have some bits you could improve on. So do you know what your students have said about your course so far? Do you know what bits people do well? Do you know what you think could be done better? But really, this is just an opportunity for you to have a chat with the person next to you or nearby, and so tell them the truth. Because it's not in a big group. You can say to someone else, "Oh, I've no idea." That's fine. It's just a couple of minutes to compare notes on what we've been saying about quality assurance and knowing where your course is doing well and where it could be improved. So off you go, have a chat. I'll call you back to attention in a couple of minutes. Hello, everybody. Don't worry, you'll get another short break in a while. So you had plenty to say. You had things to say. That's good. So just continuing a little here. Systems analysis. Here's an outline of a big curriculum. This is education in terms of boxes and arrows. So if we look, here is our plan. So this is everything we plan to be as an outcome. And we break that down into specific objectives. And so that box represents everything we intend to happen as teachers. So we know that curriculum has to be described to many people in different ways. So this is just a way of looking at the process. So here is our plan of what we intend is going to happen. Next box is actual teaching. So that's when we deliver some teaching. So we try and make sure that people achieve all of those objectives. Now, in our case, of course, that can be online, and that's what we have designed. And here we have other learning experiences. So we're teaching people in an online environment, but we completely know that they will be working regularly in rheumatological clinics, in a clinical environment. And so we know they are having other learning experiences all the time, and we hope that they are bringing those together with the slightly more theoretical approach to be able to learn from all of those situations. And then here we have a smaller box, and this is when we assess what they have learned in those teaching and learning opportunities. And it's a smaller box because we don't test absolutely everything they learn. We just sample a slice through the curriculum. And if only students and learners would stop trying to guess or bet what we are going to test and just try to be the best they can be, it would be better. So this is whatever is chosen from a big exam bank that year to test. So we don't have to test everything every time, but we do have to make sure that what is tested is a true sample, a representation of all of the things which were taught. It just costs too much to test everything. It's too exhausting. The UK education system at the moment is just testing everything from 6-year-olds onwards, and it is just pointless. Okay, so every one of those experiences all goes into this box, which in the UK we call evaluation. So that's when we work out how we're doing. Do we know how well we've done, where we could improve, what do the students tell us, what do the convenors tell us, what do the authors tell us? And so we can go round the cycle again and perhaps make better objectives, perhaps make better assessments, perhaps better teaching sessions and so on. So we're engaged in this cycle. So what we're doing is we're delivering a great deal of that online. And this is, as I said, in a work-based environment. So I show you this because we are working in this cycle, and it's moved. And as I've said, we've focused on what we're assessing and how we're evaluating it. So what's our assessment philosophy in EULAR? As I mentioned, it's not just to recall facts or to recall facts in a clinical context. It's more than that. It's to demonstrate that then people can apply that knowledge, put it into practice, and that they can then demonstrate clinical problem solving, clinical reasoning. And that they can, and our aim is to try and assess people at the right cognitive level, in other words, quite high. And we also need to make sure we are discouraging guessing. So this is the whole point of the 1 in 5, is it means that it's discouraging guessing. Because if you just say true, false, you've got a 50-50 chance of getting it right, haven't you? And that's really not giving the right message. And so most medical curricula now have got rid of true, false, because it's just not giving the right message. It's saying, oh, well, why don't you guess? And that's not really very clinically professional. So we try to discourage guessing, and of course we're trying to be valid, reliable and fair. We're also trying to build questions that can be, to have enough questions in a question bank to randomly pull out examples that test the same area, so that you can't choose your favourite research area and focus on that, or you don't keep asking the same questions every year. But this is hard because you have to have sufficient number of questions that of good quality in your question bank to be able to randomise this. And just to put this into context, I think, you know, in the US, where they have national testing, it's a multi-million-pound task to build a central and maintain a central data exam bank of questions. Because, of course, they have to be updated, they have to be correct, they have to be statistically proved to be valid and good. So we are trying to move towards that, but that's a daunting task. But we know that we want things to be case-based, so in that clinical context as much as possible. Hence, the original design of things to be in an interactive case or in an in-depth discussion. Blueprinting means you look at the plan and you select across the whole area of the knowledge. So you're not just focusing on one particular section. And as I mentioned, the correct cognitive level. Now, one problem is that Eric and I have to go with the questions that we've got. And sometimes we don't have much choice. We have to choose the questions which are accurate, add up, make sense, and give the correct answer. And so the better the questions that you people create for us, the more we can select the best questions for that exam environment. So if we raise our quality, it really does impact on the exam at the end. So these are some really simple ways to improve credibility and quality assurance. Invest sufficient time and energy. I know that's actually the hardest thing, but what I'd say is don't wait till May the 30th to think, oh right, I've done the text now, I'll just have a go at the assessment questions. I would suggest, if anything, you look at them first because they are testing, they are difficult to do. So make sure you invest sufficient time and energy. So no late night sessions to a deadline, it's too hard. You will make mistakes and it won't be a high enough quality. Other things is that to make sure we have a process which is documented. So we know that things are supposed to happen in a certain way, that meet deadlines. More than one person looks at everything because that is a way to enhance reliability. So here, ensure all assessment judgments are moderated by groups. So if you've written some assessments, share them with your peers. They will help you improve them. I've now instituted having exam boards with an external person on that exam board. And EULAR has said to the Dutch government, I think, that we run these standards, therefore the Dutch government can accept that EULAR is operating a suitable quality assurance system. So we are measured by outside bodies on these sort of elements to show that we're not just a group of people saying, oh no, we like him, he can pass. So it's, all of these processes are important. And also try and make sure that, although we have a process, but that everybody follows it. Easier said than done. And also that we get chances to collect feedback from people about how to do it better next time round that cycle. So here's my little picture you may not be aware of all the things that have to happen in all of these boxes. So this first box, let's say this is for an exam. In order for an exam to be valid, fair and reliable, you have to have a lot happening before the exam. You have to have the questions written, that's where you come in. They have to be blueprinted, that's you again, but also us. You have to make sure there are questions across the whole curriculum. You have to have had more than one person look at it to improve it. So that's where the convenors and authors, all of these different roles, are trying to provide that peer review process. Then an external person needs to look at it, usually me, to make sure that it abides by our rules. And then we need to decide where we think a pass mark is going to be, how much reading, how many questions there should be for an exam. So we set all of those things, we sit down and look at all of those things, we record them in a document. Then the exam happens, the questions are presented, the answers are recorded, and then we have to analyse what happened. Because usually there are some things that happen that we had no idea would happen. Something we thought was perfectly clear in a question was perfectly not clear to 90% of the people who actually sat the exam. So we have to analyse the performance to find out where there are questions which are not behaving in the way we hoped they would, so that we can exclude those questions and never ask them again. And so that we can actually do some adjustments to make sure that the right people pass that exam. In other words, that people are not penalised by our lack of skill as examiners. So we now have exam boards, we meet and we look at the results before we actually release the results. So although it is a computerised process, there is still need for human judgment. And every time we still learn new things. So can you see how you're really important in making sure that this whole chain of things can happen so that we can have the quality that we need? So I'm going to unapologetically show you one more slide that you've already seen. Okay? And I'm going to make that jump up and down. Okay? So if it's in May and you start to think about it, that's already too late. Okay? So really we want the clock to start on 10th of January for everybody start working. And the clock is starting now actually. That's why you're here. Shall I make that I'll go back. I'll just make that go down again because I liked that. Yes, still things in PowerPoint to learn. Who'd have thought it? Okay, so that's all I wanted to say. I just wanted to review EULAR processes. We've seen the timetable again. We've talked about quality. We've talked about how your working practices and your behaviour really affects the quality that we're able to give. So everybody in the room, you are all really important. And it comes down to small things like checking the spelling, checking that the marks add up, checking that you've used the templates or applied the rules we're going to talk about later, and that you've probably shown it to someone else who can help point out those things so that it doesn't have to be me sending it back in red writing going, I've rewritten this question, or please rewrite this question, because that's too difficult. It's getting near deadlines and that makes it unnecessarily stressful. So that's all I have to say in that bit. So I'll just wave to the cameraman. I'm going to now give you, I think, a 6-minute comfort break. 6. And I'm going to set my timer. So in 6 minutes, you don't have time to have a coffee, but you can have a coffee after Jose's session. Okay. So but you have got time, and I would like you to just sort of stand up, move